Google search is used in over 95% of the searches completed around the world, and despite this, there's actually a battle going on between the Australian government and Google, and it might result in Google search being pulled from that entire country. Obviously, this would be a major impact to the people in Australia, and it would hammer on Google's revenues. However, this is part of a much larger battle that will impact us in ways that are much more invasive than just the loss of Google search. Plus, this isn't the last time we'll see this battle, and it will impact many more people than just the ones in Australia. Google builds search results for just about anything you type in, and that includes the weird things that you're just a little unsure if you should type in. They then aggregate those results and deliver an ad that's based on you and what you've typed in, and then they allow you to click on the content you'd like and go about your merry little way. That's a pretty good service, and not just for the person who is conducting the search, it's a great service for the company or the individual who owns the content or has created the content that you'd like to look at, because it drives a ton of traffic towards that. It's such an important service, and it's really allowed me to do what I do here on YouTube, delivering you news and knowledge in the smart home space. And I'll let that little tidbit sink in for later in the video. It's an important service because it drives revenue around the world. And for me personally, I've made thousands of dollars using this service on Google search, YouTube search, and other ways that Google kind of aggregates people together and brings them to the content they want. This is the same with every type of content that's available out there today, even again, that creepy stuff that you type in. As soon as you have that traffic, well, you can sell products, you can sell advertisements to companies that fit your market. You can come up with a number of different business models, but it's that traffic that drives your revenue opportunity. It's what you do with that traffic that really drives your revenue, and that's what the media companies are doing today. They have a number of different models, and I think one of the ones is when they tell you you only have one free article left this month and you can read this one, but I'm not coming back, so maybe you should be doing something better with that. But today, and I would say in the last few years, many of these media companies have figured out that YouTube is an incredible opportunity for driving new subscribers or new revenue in other ways, and so they've started to create their own YouTube channels, sometimes many of them for different types of news content, and they are then using those videos to get listed in Google search discovery and in Google search results, as well as YouTube search results. And just to draw another comparison for later in the video here, guess what happens to all of my videos too? Anyways, the Australian government has come up with something that's called the News Media Bargaining Code. This code, or what will become law, enforces that Google will enter into an agreement with every media company in order to be able to display the results or their content on search results. It's that enforcing of an agreement that I think is Google's biggest issue with this, because it is a big risk for that company to have to take on all of these different contracts, and they'll have an arbitrator who will decide the value on that in many cases. So it becomes a real risk to Google in terms of the money they can make on aggregating news versus the money they can spend on aggregating news. And it's funny because Google is not actually disagreeing with paying to aggregate news content, and that's a little strange to me. It's more this access to risk, or this increase in risk for them as a business. Now, there will be a ton of impacts around this one battle, and it goes beyond Google search, despite the fact that what Google has said so far is that if the code is passed as it is, then Google search would have to be stopped in that country. But I want to give my own personal opinion here for a little bit, and I'm sorry I'm going to get up on a bit of a soapbox here, but I think there's a lot of things that are actually missing from the entire conversation, and as a result, it's going to hurt you, and I'm frustrated by it as well. These companies that the Australian government are protecting are the mainstream media, and this is an important part of democracy in general, and so I understand why it's become a priority for the government to protect. However, there's an incredible amount of work and expertise and infrastructure that's gone into what Google has created, and actually Facebook is in the exact same boat, and they're saying very similar things about this code. These are not simple things that you can just replace, and so there's quite a bit of risk that goes along with the loss of Google search. I also personally think that this is missing the whole point of news, and we're protecting these mainstream media companies, but there are scores of people like me that are delivering the news just as well and just as much as companies like the Daily Telegraph. By the way, that's a company that's owned or operated by Rupert Murdoch, and I really know that he's run into some tough times with the pandemic, and so I can see why the government's got to fight for them. Don't get me wrong. I know that there's been loss of revenue for the mainstream media, and this has affected many people. I don't mean to lower or lessen the impact that that has had. And there's a real component here of just how much power companies like Google and Facebook have. And that's unfortunately a discussion for another day. The other thing that they're missing here is that the internet is free. It's free to do what you want. And so when I look at a piece of law going in and I think about my own website, does that mean automatelife.net every time I link to an Australian news source, a news company's source, I have to pay them a fee? Well, what about in reverse? What about other types of content that's out there? What makes the media so special? So who or what draws the line as to what content Google has to pay for to link to? I mean, I'm guessing it's Rupert Murdoch makes that decision? It's just a feeling of the powerful battling the powerful for more power, isn't it? And you know what? We could all go to Bing search and use that, and we wouldn't be as happy with the results, but we could probably get by. But it's the other components of this that everyone is missing. See, Google search powers everything Android based. If you have a Pixel phone or any Android phone, well, your Google search bar just went away, that quick one that you like to use. And you won't be able to use the Chrome browser that includes Google search. That's gone too. What about aggregating the data or the different shows on the new Google Chromecast with Google TV? That seems like that bar would even have to go away in many cases. So maybe that Android TV or Google TV device, the whole set of them, would have to go away as well. Google search powers YouTube, and YouTube really makes money the exact same way, or many of the same ways, that Google search does. It delivers advertisements based on other people's content, so it only stands to reason that this would be at risk as well. And actually, a number of months ago, when Google was looking at the first versions of this code, they said, that's at risk. That means YouTube Music is at risk as well, and actually the way it's written or the way it's being interpreted at the moment, who knows who's accurate at this point, is that the entire ecosystem of sharing content that Google allows within services like Gmail, which has a Google search bar in it, by the way, would be at risk. That couldn't happen as well. The Google Assistant, which is one of the most important voice assistants around the world and actually leads Australia by quite a bit, is at risk as well. It would lose a number of its components. You won't be able to ask Google Assistant for the news. That's the same exact problem, and the same holds true for the video news that's contained in that service on the smart displays. We already know YouTube and YouTube Music are in trouble, and so you're left with the general inquiries, which you can't do anymore because that's using Google search. You also can't use Google Maps. That's another component that has has Google search in it. This is so much further than just Google search. It's a massive loss. And so the Australian government is playing hardball at this point, and I get that they have to do that in order to position themselves well and to try and adjust the power struggle that's here. So I understand it, but I can't imagine wanting to be the person who gets rid of all of those services that are, in some cases, for some people, really critical to how they live. Voice assistants now help a lot of people with a lot of things they maybe couldn't do on their own, or they would just require a lot of help with. So I think maybe Google and the Australian government and their advisors should maybe just take the exact length of time that this video takes to watch and consider some of the other things that they're probably impacting. The amount of revenue that would be lost by Google will be massive, and they've already talked about numbers of just Google search, but there's more there. We're talking about devices at this point. Plus, the Australian government and its citizens are going to be heavily impacted by the loss of all of those different services if that's what comes to pass. Now, I said this would impact more than Australia, and I meant that. Now, what's going on in the world right now is a number of countries, here in Canada and actually in France as well, both of those countries are considering their own legislation or laws to go into effect that would do a very similar thing. In fact, those three countries, including Australia, will be meeting later in 2021 to talk about exactly the strategies they want to employ with these big tech companies. There are discussions going on around the world about this right now, but again, we're missing the point. We're talking about funding and making sure that the revenue streams of these media companies that are operating as if 20 years ago was still the way that media was done, we're going to make sure that they have their revenue streams. So it's just the powerful taking from the powerful again, and we're not moving in to this new world that we're living in. So I think what needs to happen is media companies need to continue to adjust to the new economy. This is how the world works with technology. As technology changes, we all have to shift, and that's part of the lesson here for all of us to see. Economies change, technologies change, and we all have to shift over time. I'm the new competitor for the media companies. I think it might be time for many of you, especially in Australia right now, it might be time for you to go chat with your member of parliament, which is what I think they call it in Australia. Anyways, talk to your representative, and as these discussions come up in your country, you're going to have your own opinion. Maybe you think that the media should get these kinds of deals guaranteed. That's okay. I'm okay with that. You just need to be aware of the impacts that will happen in your home and with your tech as this kind of thing goes on. For now, go check out the other smart home news on our channel. You're going to see a ton from makers just like Google, and actually the new partnership with Samsung, super impactful. So go check that out. Otherwise, guys, thanks for watching today. And of course, don't hate, automate.